desire to be unified with each other. And one of the issues that the main insurgent group of Nagaland, called the NSCN Isaac Muiva, says is the unification of all Naga tribes in one mainland.
Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. Today I'm proud to present to you Lt Gen Shokin Chauhan, PVSM, AVSM, YSM, SM and DSM. The general is going to talk to us today about the northeastern part of India. He was commissioned into the Indian Army, into the 11 Gorkha Rifles in December 1979, and during his long tenure with the Indian Army has held various staff and command positions. Some of them I'd like to mention right here. He has commanded the 1 Corps, which is Indian Army's oldest and largest strike corps, the 8th Mountain Division in Western Ladakh, the 70th Mountain Brigade, both in Shopian as well as Eastern Ladakh. And he's got a large experience in counter-terrorist activities, both in the Kashmir Valley as well as in the Northeast. He was also the Director General of the Assam Rifles, which is India's oldest and largest paramilitary force. And after his retirement, he was selected as the chairman of the Ceasefire Monitoring Group in August 2018. Thank you, sir, for joining me this evening and agreeing to share your knowledge as well as your thoughts about our brothers in the Northeast.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you for calling me. It's indeed a pleasure and an honor to interact with you and share my knowledge and my views on certain issues. So thanks a lot for calling me. And Northeast actually remains, very close to my heart, and I'd love to help out to help integrate the Northeast in every manner. So let's go ahead.
Sir, let me just ask you a very broad-based question. What is the Northeast all about?
See, Northeast, Adi, is something a little different from the rest of mainland India. It's about 2.62 lakh square kilometers of an area. It's a large part of India. It's 8% of India's landmass. But it has only 3.1% of India's population. So that really means that in this huge country called India, 8% of India's land mass, but only 3.1% of the country's population. There are 40 million people, Adi, who are there from diverse origins, tribes, religions, and beliefs. And over 220 languages in multiple language families. So that's a huge difference from what we consider mainland India to be. So that's what the Northeast is. It consists of eight states, popularly known as the Seven Sisters and one brother. We'll start from the north, Arunachal Pradesh. We come further south of Arunachal Pradesh. On the east is Nagaland. You have Manipur. Then you have Mizoram. You have Tripura. And further west is Meghalaya. And connecting all these 5 states of India, or rather 6 states of India, is the largest, most populous state called Assam. So Assam is actually, if you look at it, it's like the hand, the palm of the hand connecting the fingers of the Northeast. That's what Assam is like. And then the brother, the 8th one is the brother is called Sikkim. That's further south. So these are what is known as India's Northeast.
Interesting. So may I request you, just for further understanding of the subject, give us a historical background about these states right up to the time of independence, so that we have a base and our viewers get a base before we enter into a deeper discussion about the Northeast.
Yeah, sure. Adi, I wonder if you read this book. It's called The Revenge of Geography. It's by Robert Kaplan. Very famous book. And the beginning of the book, he says, a good place to understand the present and to ask questions about the future is on the ground, traveling as slowly as possible. So that's the best place to understand the Northeast, the ground of the Northeast, or what the Northeast is actually like. And that's what I'll tell you now. As I said, there's Arunachal on the north, the crown of the Northeast. Okay? So let's talk about Arunachal first. You have almost 6 tribes, 6 large tribes in the Northeast. You have the Tangsa tribe, you have the Wancho tribe, you have the Nosi tribe, the Chakma tribe, the Tutsa tribe, the Lishu tribe, the Olo tribe, and finally the Singphro tribe. These are the tribes of Arunachal. In Assam, you have the Assamese, a large part of them, the Masas, the Bodos, the Bengalis, the Zemi Nagas, the Rongmils, the Kukis, the Mars, the Rangkuls, the Khasis, and the Karbi Anglongs. Long list. It's difficult to remember. But these are the different kind of tribes that are there just in Assam. Then you come to Nagaland. You have the Koniaks, you have the Aos, you have the Semas, Lothas, the Yunchungas, the Angami, the Chakesangs, the Changs, the Sumis, the Rengmas, the Pachoris, the Rongmais. It's a huge number of people, right? And the Liangmais. Actually, Nagaland is known as the tribe, the land of the 16 major tribes. That's how they call the same. And each tribe has a different color, a different way of looking at things, different motives, different languages, right? And in some ways, in many ways, different ways to worship God. Of course, now most of Northeast has accepted the Christian religion, but they still continue with their gods that they worship in the beginning. Okay? Then you come to Manipur. The main tribe in Manipur are the Meiteis. Then you have the Tangkul Naga, the Pomoy Naga, the Kukis, and the Pangals. These are all around. The Meiteis live in the valley, and the balance of the Naga tribes that surround the Meiteis are in the hills around Manipur. In Mizoram, you have the Lushai, the Chakmas, the Mar, the Lai, the Bru, the Mar, and the Pati. And of course, the Chin tribe. In Tripura, you have the Tripuris, the Riangs, the Bru, the Jamatias, the Chakmas, Noatias, Goloi, and Halam. So you have similar. You have Chakmas in Tripura and you have Chakmas in Mizoram. And there's a problem between them. And these are some of the things. Why I'm trying to explain this to you in detail is that many of the problems arise because of the place where these tribes are. And they desire to be unified with each other. And unless we understand the issue about tribes and why they want to be unified, why they want to live together as one tribe, we will never understand the major underlying problems of the Northeast, which is very important to understand. And finally, we come to the state of Meghalaya, where you have the Garos, the Khasis, the Hajong, the Pham, and the Tivas. So that's a lot of tribes. And as I said, 220 different languages, different tribal cultures, different colors, different situations, different dances, different gods, different festivals. And of course, problems between each other. Historical problems that have nothing to do with today's issues, but still problems between each other.
Please, so one thing that with the number of tribes that you've told us, you've mentioned this, but what seems like there are a lot of intermingling tribes between two states.
Yes.
And you say that it creates a problem between two states because of those tribes and because of various other things.
That's a great question. And I was going to come to that later, but let me try and answer it now. I'll just give you an illustration. You know, between Nagaland and Manipur, you have, as I said, Meiteis in the center of Manipur, and they occupy the valley of Manipur, the flatlands of Manipur, in a place called Imphal and the Imphal Valley. And there are 4 districts surrounding the Imphal Valley. The rest of the highlands or the hills of Manipur are all occupied by Naga tribes, Manipuri Naga tribes, who have their kith and kin in a state north of them, that is Nagaland. And one of the issues that the main insurgent group of Nagaland, called the NSCN Isaac Muiva, which I will explain later if you want, says is the unification of all Naga tribes in one mainland.
Mm.
So they want the hills of Manipur to be unified with the state of Nagaland to become what they call the Greater Nagaland. If you remember when I was speaking about the tribes in Assam, I also talked to the Naga tribes in Assam.
Mm.
So part of Greater Nagaland is also the tribal areas of Assam. So these tribes have lived together for generations, not now, for 2000, 3000 years. And today they've been divided by what they call uh, artificial lines, artificial state lines. And they say, look, we all want to belong to one land because we are Nagas. You understand that? So one of the issues of the insurgency was also the fact that they had been divided into various states. But the second issue, which I must further tell you, is an issue between India and Myanmar or Burma. When the independence came in 1947 to both India and Burma, because we were both parts of the British Empire, we drew a line, the international boundary, along which we felt that our state or the state of India would own. This line unfortunately divided a lot of Naga land. Naga origin people living on both sides of this line.
Mm.
For example, in North Nagaland, that is the area where the Konyak tribes, the Yimchunga tribes occupy. There are Yimchungars and Konyaks on the other side too. So I asked the leader of one of the larger insurgent groups, a chap called Khango, when I was the chairman of the ceasefire monitoring group, I had got Khango into the ceasefire, to accept the ceasefire between us and between the government of India and the NSCN Kaplang, that was or the K group.
Okay. Mm.
And I asked, I was sitting with Khango and I said, Khango, what do you want now? I mean, we signed the ceasefire, let's go for an overall agreement. He says, I want to be united with my Naga brothers,
Mm.
with my Konyak brothers. His Konyak brothers also live in Myanmar. So what the Nagas are also saying is, look, why don't you unite us into one large state called Greater Nagaland or Nagaland? All of us are Nagas. We all belong to similar tribes. Let us all be together. So this is the issue about tribes. Similarly, in Mizoram, and that's another reason why you must understand why a particular set of people are coming into Mizoram now because of the problem in Myanmar. The Mizos, the ruling tribe in Mizos are the Chins.
Mm.
All chief ministers, 70% of Mizoram are the Chins. But Chins are also in Myanmar. Now, during this crackdown or the martial law declared by the Tatmadaw or the Burmese army, a lot of change have come into Mizoram. So when the government of India told the government of Mizoram, look, send them back. We're not going to keep anyone there. Mizoram flatly refused. Sorry, they are brothers and they can come and go whenever they want. So that's the issue about the Northeast.
So historically, they had a lot of influence from the Chinese and as well as the Burmese kingdom. How did that end up to a point where when we got our independence, how did the history flow through?
There are the Austro-Asiatic, the Tibeto-Burmese and the Indo-Aryans were the last to arrive in this land.
Mm-hmm.
Part, if you remember, and if you look at your ancient history, this is part of the ancient trade route to China.
Yes.
You remember? And the province of Yunnan, which is mentioned in all the, in the ancient Chinese travelers, they all came from Yunnan. And Yunnan is an issue there. This was the part of the ancient trade route to China. And Assam is also a part of the ancient kingdom of Kamrup. And all these people came from the areas of Myanmar. The medieval history speaks of the Ahom kingdom, the princely states of Manipur and Tripura, inhabited by tribes and sub-tribes, which all came and all immigrated from the ancient lands of Burma, from Laos. come from Cambodia. That is why there's a similarity between them.
Mm.
The similarity of looks, definitely genetic similarities. So there's a lot of, and they speak the same language, right? And more than that, before 1822, Adi, the Burmese Empire comprised of Assam, Manipur, Nagaland. This entire area was under the Burmese Empire. By 1854, that this entire land came under one empire, the British Indian Empire. And when it came under British Indian Empire, there was a lot of migration again because it was part of one land.
Mm.
Right? So there's a lot of mixing of people who have come at that time, whether it was a tea garden, whether there was economic, whatever the process was. The issue was that these tribes settled 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1,000 years back in the lands which they now occupy. Okay? So this is what I wanted to tell you about ancient history and ancient things. That a lot of these independent tribes have lived there for centuries. Much longer than what we consider the lines of India. So this seems to be the main issue. The similarity or the genetic similarity with the tribes in Myanmar, their intermarriage, the similarity of culture with the tribes of Myanmar. And that's why you can never get Myanmar out of the situation from us. Just like India came from the larger Indian state, which had come under the British and later partition, so also is the situation in the Northeast. But in the Northeast, they're not enemies with each other. They are brothers. They intermarry, they intermove, and they want to be together. So this is also an issue where we face this insurgency.
So, but how was this line drawn then? I mean, on what basis was this line drawn? We all know the line in the western part of the country was drawn on religious lines to a large extent. There is a whole debate about the McMahon line. I won't get into that. But
you know what we took was, I understand your question, Adi. So, you want to know how independent India drew its lines between us and Myanmar.
Yes.
Us and Burma. You see, the ancient kingdom or the kingdom of Manipur seceded to India.
Okay.
So what were the lines of the kingdom of Manipur? Were what were drawn between us and Burma. Similarly, the kingdom of Tripura seceded towards India. What were the lines of the kingdom of Tripura? Those came inside India. Now, in this, the Naga tribes had never been a part of India. Like I said, they were independent tribes. So when you have independent tribes, the problem is that who do we put them under? They were definitely not a part of Burma. May have been a part of the larger Burmese empire, but definitely not a part of Burma. So they came under India. Now here we come to the second part of what you wanted to ask me, is the 9-part agreement. But before that, we go a little bit further historically. That in after the First World War, where the British had used not many, but say about 1,000 odd Naga labor under what they call the Labor Corps, Naga Labor Corps, right? These guys, some of them had got educated. So 1920, between 1920 21, they made a club called the Naga Club. That was for the first time that politically the Nagas came under one unified set of people. Came under politically. Not that they had agreed, but different tribes, people from different tribes came under one head called the Naga Club. That means representatives of different tribes. People who had taken part in the First World War had got educated. So in 2021, they went to the British, and at that time they said, look, we know freedom is coming. But when you give freedom to the rest of the country, please leave us the way we were. Don't include us in the larger part of India because we have never belonged to it. So from 1921 to 29, this was the point of discussion with the British Empire. No one took them seriously. The population was so less. And they really, they, compared to the population of India and the problem, they have actually no problem at all. So probably because they didn't insist too much, it didn't matter to the Brits. So the Brits did not take them very seriously. But this is the issue of the Naga club. Now, cut to 1946.
So,
We're about to get independent, right? And when we are about to get independence, we have the governor of Assam, who was by the British, Mr. Hydari. He was the governor of Assam. And all this area came under the Greater Assam province.
okay.
This was 1946, July 1946. And the governor of Assam, Hydari, had an agreement with them. The crux of the agreement was that you join the state of India, and 10 years, after 10 years, India will give you the choice of whether you want to leave or remain. Besides, of course, the fact that we would accept their tribal laws and we would accept everything else, no one would touch their lands, no one would touch their culture, and they would not be pushed around at all. The main issue was that give us 10 years and then tell us whether you want to belong to India. This seems to be the issue. That when independent India became independent India, 1950-51, when the Nagas reminded us that, look, we've signed this agreement, 9-point agreement, they were told that this no longer is acceptable to the government of India and that there will be no further division of India. And that the line that we drew on 15th August 1947 would remain. And the lands of India, the boundaries of India were now inviolate.
Okay.
Okay. This seems to be the issue, Adi, why we have a problem, why the 9-point agreement had to be pushed out, and why with this slowly this tribal insurgency started. Okay. This is the main issue.
So it basically started in the Naga region where the Naga tribes probably felt,
Absolutely
disconnected with what was happening around them. So there is also a 21-point agreement I read about somewhere. May I request you, before we move forward into more on the current this thing, can I request you to spend a little time to tell us what that was and what happened to that?
So we'll continue with the 9-point agreement.
Sure.
The government of India has said no to the 9-point agreement. And insurgency by 1956 starts. There was a guy called Fizo, who is supposed to be the father of this insurgency.
Okay.
Because he is the one who said that we do not accept secession. Okay. Now, there was also, along with this, the Naga National Conference, the NNC, which was also part of this. But the armed insurgency was now starting by 1956. Okay. Troops from the mainland India had to be lifted into Nagaland. And this tribal insurgency became an armed insurgency. And a lot of these armed cadre then went into Myanmar and towards China to seek training and weapons. Right? 1956 could be the start of it, both in the incomplete Northeast. Now, as this goes further, 56, 57, 58, 59, the NNC and the government of India start talking again. Okay? And once that happens, there is a 20-point agreement. Okay? That agree in 1959, where they say that, okay, we will now make the state of Nagaland. The government of India will put an additional section in our constitution, that is 371A, that refers to the state of Nagaland, where we will agree that your culture, your lands, your languages will be are inviolate, but that you will belong to the state of Nagaland. And so this 20-point agreement was signed. In 1960, Nagaland became one of the states of India.
Okay.
Okay. 1st December is the day of Nagaland Day. That is the day the state became a state. But when the NNC started this and the NFG started this, the rest of these people did not agree. So after 2-3 years, this insurgency started again. That means they said, no, we didn't want to be a part of India. You have now betrayed us. And there was a lot of killing between themselves. A lot of people, a lot of leaders were killed. As the insurgency continued, but the state of Nagaland remained. Elections to the state of Nagaland, it was a 42 members state. Initially, they were nominated, and they started getting elected as a part of the election commission. And a large number of Nagas participated in the election. There was no problem. But from 1960 onwards, these issues started. By 1965, cadres of India, the Nagas had moved and were getting help from China. 1965, 66, 67, this continued till the Shillong Accord of 1975, where the Naga federal government and that of the NFG, the NSC, and what they had under them, the Naga army, agreed that they would surrender their arms and they would be given training, and they would the insurgents would be taken into the paramilitary forces or the central armed police forces. And therefore we raised 2 different battalions of the border security force called 111 and 112, which consisted entirely of the insurgents of Mizoram and Nagaland.
Wow, okay.
Okay. Once again, after 3-4 years, the Shillong Accord failed. There was this group that had been led by a chap called Isaac Chisisiu, who was a Sema, and Thongkolong Muiwa, who was a Tangkul Naga, and Khaplang, who was a Konyak Naga. These 3 decided to break away from the NFG and the NNC and took their cadres, and there was anyway a group which was coming back from China, which had weapons and had been trained, and they were at that time in Myanmar or Burma, in a camp there, when the Shillong Accord was signed. So they were told, stay on there. And these guys broke up after 2 to 3 years, went back, and then the insurgency started again. So now you have and they now raised this group called the Naga Socialist Council of Nagaland. The National Socialist Council of Nagaland. Okay. The NSCN. At that time it was one NSCN. But by 1982-83, differences started emerging between Muiwa and Khaplang. That means between the tribes, the Tangkul tribe, the Sema tribe, and the Konyak tribes. And Khaplang, representing the Konyak tribe, Khaplang was from Myanmar, broke away from the NSCN and formed his own called the NSCN K, or the NSCN Khaplang. And what left behind was the NSCN IM, that means the NSCN Isaac and Muiwa. Isaac Chisisiu and Muiwa. The Tangkuls and the Semas versus the Khaplang or the Konaks. But both declared war on India and continued with the insurgency. Now it comes 1997, September 30th. We have fought them from 1956. The land is there, the jungles are there, the people are there. And insurgency lasted a long time. So we signed the first ceasefire agreement with the NSCN, with the IM, then the Kaplan group, and then started from 1997 an unbroken ceasefire that will continue till. And the talks have also continued similarly. We've been talking to the Naga Socialist Council, Nagaland, Isaac Muiwa group, the Kaplan group, and further there have been two more breaks called the Reformation NSCN R and NSCN Khitovi Nikpao group, the KN group. So we have four NSCN groups that are now in ceasefire with the government. And that is the issue that we're talking about till now. That is, as late as a week ago, they're still in Delhi. The ceasefire has been extended by another year, which is a normal situation. Every month of April 15, 16, we signed the ceasefire with them. And this continues, and the talks continue. In 2015, September or August, Mr. Ravi, the present interlocutor, was named the interlocutor by the Prime Minister, signed the framework agreement with them. Essentially, the framework agreement was an agreement to have an agreement, a larger agreement.
Okay.
Broadly, the Government of India has not released the details of the framework agreement. The NSC and IM has released them. But whatever be the other issues, it was an agreement to have a larger agreement. Until then, we would continue with this. Okay? But unfortunately, over the last 2 years, the NSC and IM feels that they've been let down by Mr. Ravi, and therefore have said that they will not be talking to Mr. Ravi at all. And they're looking for another interlocutor, or Mr. Ravi is going to continue as an interlocutor, and they're trying to now get a larger, broader agreement so that Nagaland can go ahead with its assimilation into the mainland of our country. So this, in short, is the process by which we have come so far.
Well, so there have been a lot of issues, and I think by the way that you've explained it, one thing that comes out is I don't think we have understood what the nuances of that area is. For the lack of a better words, I'd like to use that word. We've not really understood. We've thrown the stick on them, and obviously they've thrown it back on us. So one question when anybody discusses the Northeast comes up is the AFSPA. That is, of course, spoken about every time there is a protest or something like that. Otherwise, it's in a quiet background. What is the AFSPA, sir, and what effect does it have on the ground, positive or negative?
Okay. Now, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act of 1958, like I told you, from 56 onward, the armed insurgency had started. So, in order to give legal basis for the Government of India to deploy the armed forces in Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura, Assam, they formulated an act called the Armed Forces Special Powers Act of 1958. In essence, this act is only an act to give legality to the operation of the armed forces in these states. That's the essence of the act. That's all. It gives legality that the Government of India has ordered you now have the legal right to operate. Because the armed forces are not really permitted to operate within the country.
Correct.
They are meant for separate purposes. So that's in essence the AFSPA. Section 6 of the AFSPA talks of powers to the to the armed forces, which gives us the power to go inside houses, to arrest people, to check without a warrant, based on information, and certain broader powers. That is the issue which people feel most insecure about, and that is what they're looking to repeal. But the AFSPA in itself as a term has become a bad word.
Yeah. And
therefore, its repealing has been hotly debated all over the Northeast. So the AFSPA is in the entire state of Nagaland, entire state less the Imphal Valley, the entire state of Manipur, in 4 districts of Arunachal, that means the districts bordering Nagaland, and in 2 districts in Assam.
So,
Places the AFSPA has been moved. The government is looking at ways by which they can make this AFSPA more acceptable. But other than that, it is just a law that allows the armed forces to operate in insurgency within areas.
okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
And it is every 6 months it is restarted and given legality again. As per the law, every 6 months the AFSPA has to be re-looked at. The state government has to accept it, and it passes the acceptance of the AFSPA for another 6 months. That's the way it is.
So you mentioned in the explanation of the rise of these insurgent groups is that they had connections with the Chinese and they've been traveling up and down getting weapons and stuff like that. It's quite an open fact that the Chinese were trying to push in a lot of weapons into Assam as well at a certain point of time. I'd like to ask you, what are the connections like today? We do hear some of these, insurgent group leaders in Yunnan and various other places in China. But generally speaking, sir, do they have the same relations as what they had in the past, or have these guys also kind of moved away from the Chinese dragon?
Adi, it's a difficult question, mainly because of the lack of information.
Okay.
In the Yunnan province, on the border between China and Myanmar or Burma, there is a small town called Ruli, R-U-L-I.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the grey market weapons are sold.
Okay.
So what China has done is they have washed their hands of the responsibility of giving arms and weapons by making them freely available in the grey market. So these insurgent groups, after extorting money from the people, can go to Ruli, buy the weapons, and bring them back into India. So that is one way by which they're getting weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need any further help from China? At the present moment, I don't think so. Because money they are extorting, weapons they are able to buy, and China has made no attempt to, neither China nor Myanmar have made any attempts to stop the Ruli circuit. Further, Myanmar is in trouble itself. Not just the coup, but there are about 100 insurgencies inside Myanmar.
Especially the north, sir.
Yeah. So you have the lands of Laos and Cambodia and Thailand that are also open, and a lot of gun running, drug running is also done. So weapons are available all over, but also in Ruli. Whether there's definitely a blind eye being shown by China. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
But whether they are actively giving them money or any other kind of assistance is unknown, because they have allowed that part to be totally hazy. So that's where it is at the present moment.
Very convenient on the Chinese part to just put a blind eye, because it's basically someone who's trying to kick himself. So why would somebody else stop him? Fair enough, sir.
Absolutely.
So majorly the demand of these 3-4 groups. One thing again comes out of your talk is they are fighting for their recognition, if I may just put it that way. They're also fighting amongst themselves. So today, what do you think in today's day and age, after being in the chairman of the ceasefire position, what are they asking for?
Finally, we've been able to bring them to 2 issues where we've got stuck with the NSCN IM. One issue is the issue about the fact that they want their own constitution, or what they call the Yazibo. And secondly, they want their own flag. The rest of the issues, they feel the integration of the larger integration of the Naga land, etc., they would be able to do in time and politically integrate themselves in some way. But now, basically, the agreement with the NSCN IM has stopped at this point. They want their own flag and they want their own constitution. Now, if you know that we've just recently scrapped Article 370, where Kashmir had its own flag, the state of Jammu and Kashmir had their own flag, and they had their own constitution, as well as they had their own laws, the Ranbir laws. So the government finds it very difficult to give this to Nagaland or the Naga group at this particular point of time. But as of now, this is where the talks have stopped. That this is what they want, and they are not willing to sign an agreement with the government of India till the resolution of this is.
Okay, fair enough, sir. At least they've got their demand simple and straight sorted out.
Yeah.
Fair enough, sir. So, but on the contrary, and this may be a very layman's observation on my personal part, or for that matter, some others as well. There is a certain sense of nationalism, Indian nationalism, which is coming in a lot of the spaces in the Northeast today. May not be so in certain tribes and stuff like that, but you do see a spurt of that Indian nationalism coming in. Would you agree to something like that, sir?
Adi, absolutely. I would go to the extent of saying that 90% of the citizens of Nagaland, in their heart and mind, have accepted being an Indian. They've accepted being Indian. They want to be a part of the Indian story. They're looking for economic benefits for themselves, they're looking for education, they're looking for jobs. Nagas are extremely talented people, extremely talented, and are probably only, handicapped by the lack of good education, higher education. Otherwise, they have everything with them. They're a wonderful race. Okay, so yes, they're very much a part of India, very much emotionally a part of India, and there is, of course, sympathy for the groups because they feel that the groups have been fighting for them. It is, whether it is extortion or whether they give voluntarily, the entire society pays the groups money. Like I said, whether it's extortion or whether they give voluntarily or involuntarily, the entire society pays money to these groups. And that's how the groups build their coffers to continue this fight for them. So it's a two-way situation. They accept India, they're part of India, they take part very enthusiastically in the elections. Violence is much less than the states of, other states of mainland India. It's there, but it's much less, right? So this is what I feel is that we are very close to a resolution. If we show a larger heart to them, they will definitely be a part of us very soon.
Fair enough, sir. That's very encouraging to know. Why I mention this is because I'm from hotels and we have a lot of these Northeast people coming and working with us. They're very hardworking people, fantastic people. And one thing that I realized is they all speak in Hindi. And it was
they know English very well.
Yes. So it was a very interesting observation that I made with one of them. And I said, you guys speak Hindi really well. And he turned around and told me that, listen, that's what we speak. We speak our local language and mixed with Hindi quite a bit. Like you guys speak English and Hindi here. We speak Hindi and our language back home. So that was
Naga. It's a mix between Hindi, Assamese, Nepali words, Bengali words, and certain Naga words. And actually linked language between all the tribes, the Nagami.
That's very interesting, sir. And it's very encouraging to know that, finally our brothers are going to come back and say, hey, let's move forward.
That put a lot of responsibility on us that we must integrate them well.
Absolutely.
Must educate them well, give them room for higher education, give them jobs, get them jobs. This insurgency will go away on its own. I'm absolutely certain.
So, one subject I know you're very passionate about is the Assam Rifles. I'd like you to tell me what is the role that the Assam Rifle plays in keeping that area, one, peaceful, two, together, and three, we all know the amount of work which is done on social causes by the Assam Rifles. It's the list is never ending. How would you kind of broadly or actually define the role of the Assam Rifles in that area?
Okay, a little bit of history. Assam Rifles was created in 1835. So it's almost 185 years old. 186 years old this year. Secondly, it was created to guard the then British tea gardens.
Okay.
And then when the First World War started, units of the Assam Rifles were integrated into the Indian Army and fought as a part of the Indian Army. So post First World War, British realized that the Assam Rifles had done very well, and they made them a separate regiment. Post independence, the Assam Rifles was actually under the governor of Assam.
Okay.
And under the Ministry of External Affairs. And they were, along with the Indian Army, guarding the Indian, Tibet, and Indo-China borders. That is how 5 Assam Rifles was able to help the Dalai Lama in his escape from Tibet and brought him inside India. That was 5 Assam Rifles. Because at that time, they were guarding the borders. In the 1962 war with China, the Assam Rifles took part and guarded the border and held various areas with great strength and showed great courage in stopping the Chinese in various places. They continued to guard both the Indo-Burma border or the Indo-Myanmar border and the Indo-China border along with the army for a longish period of time. Till 1999. That is the Kargil conflict.
Okay.
Post the Kargil conflict, in 2002, they had a group of ministers meeting in which they said one border, one force was the accepted idiom. So, one border, one force means the Assam Rifles was given the responsibility of guarding the Indo-Myanmar border. Right, 1,776 kilometers, 1673 plus another 100 or something. So that's where the first responsibility of Assam Rifle lies. 21 battalions of the Assam Rifles along the Indo-Myanmar border, right from Arunachal down till Mizoram. Okay. The balance of the 20, 23, 24 battalions, the total 46 battalion force, are deployed in counterinsurgency. Unfortunately, our police forces have not been able to have capability to defend themselves against the insurgents in any of the northeastern states. None of the police forces have been able to raise this kind of ability. So the Assam Rifles remains both in an insurgency, counter-insurgency role and a border guard.
Okay.
This is where it is. It is officered by the Indian Army. Right? And therefore it is paramilitary. So 80% of the officers in the Assam Rifles are from the Indian Army, 20% are within the cadre of the Assam Rifles itself. So that is how the Assam Rifles is the sole paramilitary force. The other BSF, CISF, CRPF are central armed police forces.
Yes.
For sake of administration, it comes under the Home Ministry. That's the background of the Assam.
And what is it? I mean, are people fond of the regiment in the northeast? The Assam Rifles in the northeast is
till 1986. almost 70% of the cadre of the Assam Rifles was from the northeast. 1986. 1986 onwards, they declared it an all India, all caste based force. So we started getting people from all over India. But the acceptability of the Assam Rifles has always been there in the northeast. It's a very important force for the northeast. But since it's countering insurgency, there are problems, as any force will have. But emotionally, the Assam Rifles remains very connected to the northeast emotionally.
The region, as per se.
The Assam Rifles has given units to the Indian Army to fight insurgency or fight terrorism in Sri Lanka. Some units in 1990, 1991, 92, 93 till 95 were in Kashmir. So Assam Rifles has helped out the government of India in all those places also. And done very well, extremely well.
So it's quite a proud organization, I must say, sir.
Very good. It's excellent. Very, very good.
So it's a very broad question, and when people talk about integration of the northeastern states with the mainland of India, everybody says yes, we need to integrate and stuff like that. You spent a lot of time with the people right there, sir. Human demands are very basic, very, very basic, sir. They roti, kapda, makan, naukri today, naukri, some internet and this and that. Is it the fact that do you think that integration should come in the way of development and action on the ground today, which we are seeing in a lot of parts of our country? It should also be extended. I mean, we see some news which is, there's a lot of work which is happening there as well. But do you think that development will bring about that integration that has been missing for a long time?
I think absolutely, but development should take place. It's not happening. There's a lot of noise about it, but I don't see it happening on ground. A lot of newspaper articles about something or the other happening, roads getting improved, but they're not. The road from Dimapur to Kohima remains in as bad a state as it was. It's being 4-lane, but it's being 4-lane for the last 5 years. Similarly, the road from Nagaland, Kohima to Manipur or to Imphal is in very bad condition. The roads from within Nagaland to their district headquarters and to further villages very bad. Electricity is extremely low. The internet coverage is literally non-existent. So all in all, there's a lot of hype, but it hasn't happened. There are very few higher learning institutions in Nagaland. I wish our country did more. There is, like you've interacted with Northeast children. They're extremely talented, and all we need to do is bring institutions of higher learning to them. We haven't been able to get any industries there. We haven't been able to give them any kind of investment. So they remain handicapped. So I really don't know what you're talking about. We should have much greater investment, many more industries, many more institutions of higher learning, many medical institutions. All these are sadly
tourism, sir.
They're not there.
I think tourism is a big opportunity, which is
the hotels are not there. What is the tourists do? And they're very enthusiastic people. Their Hornbill Festival has a lot of tourists coming in. Maybe 2 lakh, 3 lakh tourists, 10 lakh tourists totally. But the accommodation is very basic. And, but it's a pity. I really wish we should have done more. Less hype and much more. I would really like.
Point taken, sir. Sir, I'd like you for the final question. I'd like you to future gaze just a little bit and tell me, where do you see the situation going in terms of stability in that region in the next 3 to 5 years? Because at the end of it, do you see the insurgency kind of dying down a bit? Because obviously people are also going to get sick of fighting. We're seeing that to a large extent in Kashmir as well, that the incidents of violence have come down except for these anti-terrorist operations and stuff like that. But generally, between the general public and the army, the incidence of violence has come down quite a bit. Do you see something like that happening in the Northeast as well?
Anyway, the insurgency and the incidence of violence are very less, extremely less.
Hmm.
All these groups have been in ceasefire with us from 1997.
Hmm.
So within the state of Nagaland, we have a ceasefire. We have no ceasefire in Arunachal. We have no ceasefire in the hill districts of Manipur. But the incidents of violence are very, very, very less. Okay. Especially with the Naga insurgents.
Hmm.
In Manipur, there is the valley-based insurgents who don't have a ceasefire with us. Those incidents of violence will continue. Now, the issue about violence is that this is directed violence. It is not random violence.
Okay.
There is a clarity there that they are extorting money, and if you don't pay, then they'll target. Okay. They're extorting money because we don't have an agreement with them.
Hmm.
So we need to get this agreement. And 5 years from now, we must have an agreement. Adi. We must have an agreement. We must have an agreement that is acceptable to the insurgents of Nagaland.
So,
it should not be like the 9-point agreement of 46, the 20-point agreement of 1960, the 4-point agreement of the Shillong Accord in 1975. It should not be like that. They are all failed accords. We must have an accord that sticks, continues. People of Nagaland need this peace. We need to get peace to invest there, to have institutes of higher learning, to have institutes of medical institutes. We need peace. And they more than anything understand the value of peace. So we just need a breakthrough. Till then, no one can really say how things will happen. Today the groups are under control. Tomorrow they can move into something worse. After all, they still have about 4,500-5,000 weapons with them.
yes.
We still have a neighbor that is going to continue to create problems. So we need economic processes. We need economic progress. We need this integration.
I guess that's the need of the hour. And I hope what you're saying does come true and we do get some sort of a peace accord with most of these insurgents group. Let the violence stop. I think a lot of the problems will stop the violence themselves. Once that happens, people look for other avenues and stuff like that. One thing is interesting, sir. I must tell you this, and there are these little comedy videos and little snippets which are coming out from the Northeast. The youngsters are doing it, and they're trying to put it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all these places. They're very cute, small little videos where they're doing some acting or some dance or something like that, and they're getting good followership. So I guess it's also the new age way wherein that population also needs to get integrated with the rest of the country. Absolutely. And as the communication between the rest of the country and that area becomes a bit better, things must improve, sir. So I must say, this talk has been an eye-opener, especially for me, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are going to see this video. I say this because I would go out on a ledge and put my neck on the line and say that a lot of the population of this country won't know the states and their capitals themselves, leave alone doing anything about it. I think it's high time the general public starts talking about it. So I'd like to immensely thank you for the sharing of this vast treasure trove of knowledge that you've laid out in front of us. And I think that's one of the reasons why the people over there used to, cherish you being there. And I've seen some very nice written articles from there about you. So if one can see why.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I hope to talk to you once again. Another topic, another day. And Jai Hind, sir.
Jai Hind. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.